Switching notes is going to update the props that are passed down to note form. So I want to be able to notice when my props change. Let's look at React lifecycle methods. In the React docs, the page for components lists the component lifecycle methods. They each have a will and a did around mounting. Component will mount, component did mount, which we learned is when it is created and inserted into the DOM. Updating. So an update can be caused by changes to props or states. So these methods are called when a component is being re-rendered. Component will receive props, should component update, component will update, render, and component did update. Component will receive props. So anytime your props change, this method gets run, as long as it's there. So again, like component did mount and all that stuff, you can only use this if it's a class, not a stateless functional component, because it relies on inheritance in order to get called at the right time. But as long as this thing inherits from React component, then these will get run at the appropriate time. So right under my state initialization, I'm going to add component will receive props. And let's click on it in our docs to see how it works. It's invoked before a mounted component receives new props. If you need to update the state in response to prop changes, for example, you may compare this.props and next props and perform state transitions using this.setState. So it receives as its argument what the states are about to change to. Because this is a component will receive props, it runs before the props actually change. So this.props will still be the old values. This next props object that it passes in are what they're about to change to. Let's do a console log here. Why not? Console log next props. Open up my dev tools. Okay, there are my props. Let's click a different note. And yep, it runs. So it has current note, save note, remove current note. And it's current note that we're interested in, right? So we could use destructuring here and just get next current note or something. So what do we want to do given the new note? Well, first of all, it might not be the prop that changed. So we might want to make sure that the current node ID is not the same thing. So we could say if this.props.currentNote .id not double equal next current note .id. Because this.props hasn't changed yet. This runs before it actually changes. But I receive the new props as an argument. So I compare the current note from the new props to the current note of the current props. And if it is changed, then I need to update my rich text editor with the body of that note. Heck, yeah, okay, cool. So how do we do that? So it said we could get the string value out of there by calling value.toString, but it also says creating a value from a string is all easy using createValueFromString. And then you pass in the string and you pass in HTML to tell it what kind of string it is. So it seems like we could say this, or whatever, const new editor value, or just editor value, equals next current note dot body. Right? That's the string. We call create value from string on that. And then we tell it that it's HTML. Because remember, the editor value isn't a string, it's some crazy object. But we can create that object from the HTML string by using this, which we just learned from the documentation. So once we have that, then we can call this .setState editor value. Make sense? So when the props change, which they will when we change notes, we'll get the next current note. We'll compare that to the current note, because we only want to do this if it actually changed. Maybe. What if we change the note in Firebase? The ID won't have changed, will it? So we can instead compare the current note's body to the next current note's body. If the bodies don't match, then do this thing. So then we build an editor value out of that string, and we see what happens. Create value from string is not defined. That is because it is rich text editor dot create value from string. Still got a little problem here. Can't read body property of undefined. I'm getting body off of this.props.current note. Oh yeah, next current note. That's looking for a key called next current note, right? But that's not what it's called. It's called current note. Now, if you want it to be named something else, you can do this. Current note as next current note. I think it's as. Not as. What is it? Is it, let's see. What is it? You can rename them in destructuring, right? I swear you can. Maybe not. Destructuring assignment in JavaScript. See if any of their examples. that would only be in an object. Assigning to new variable names. Yeah, colon. So current note, I want to call it next current note, just so I don't confuse myself, because there is the actual current note still, because this happens before the props change. All right, no more error. Let's choose this one. Yay! It fills it in. Yay! Let's get our one with actual HTML in here. Yay! Now let's make some changes. Oh man, what is going on? It typed it backwards at the beginning. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. Unexpected this is, and unfortunate. So what the devil is up with that? Put a little console log and handle editor changes here. Console log editor value to string HTML. Yeah, let's just make a new one. Something rich. Let's type something in here. H. Okay, paragraph H. E. Y? J. Neat. Different problem than before, but still bad. So that's what happens when I run handle editor changes. Editor value to string HTML gives me that. Maybe setting the state with the new editor value should come at the end. Let's see about that. So new, so rich. H. E. 2 E still. Y. Yes, Y. Pick up one that already exists. Oh my. Oh good. It's putting it at the beginning and the end. Oh my goodness. It's not backwards. That's progress. So something here is a little strange. What if we don't do this part? Rich stuff. Hey there. Hi there. Ho there. You're as welcome as can be. Welcome. Okay. Now it saves it right. So if we make the props thing based on body, handle editor changes is going to call that, going to change the prop, right? Which is going to come back in, run component will receive props again, which is going to trigger another editor change. So weird stuff's happening. Not exactly. I don't remember. So instead of comparing current note body, maybe I'll compare let's do this. Const editor value equals this dot state dot editor value. Make a copy of the current state, right? Then say if editor value to string is not equal to next current node dot body, then update editor value and set state. Screwed that up. Editor value is read only. This dot state dot editor where editor value equals. Oops, I did do const. I meant let. Here's a case where I actually wanted let. Bad stuff still happening. Format not supported undefined to string. I meant to string HTML. What you're seeing is a result of not doing the routing first. It's behaving differently because this is not how we did it before. Okay, now let's pick one. Okay, it sets it. Good. Let's change one of these. Hey there, and it's still doubling them up. So all of this is a complication of the fact that making a change to the thing changes the props. So here's my proposal. We store the current note on note form. The problem is we still need it to be able to change when we click it in the sidebar. But what we could do is only change the current node ID and store that at the app level, but store the entire note down here. Easier if we have routing. So that does complicate things, but I think we can manage it. So we will just put note form in charge of managing the current note. We just have to make sure that we can change the current note when the ID changes because we click something in the sidebar. So here's what I'm saying. Maybe blank note. Where a blank note is, belongs in note form. Because note form is going to have in its state a note object that's going to get initialized to this dot blank note. I'll put these in the opposite order. And it's not going to worry about props.currentNote. We're going to bind title to not current note.title, but this.state.note.title. When the title changes and handle changes, instead of this.props.currentNote, it's this.state.note. Oh, right. I did, and I moved it here. We're not done doing all that yet. But yeah, I need to call this.setState and update the note with the changes that I just made. And I need to call this.props.saveNote. So I could, to make sure that this happens afterward, not that it matters a whole lot. I could say afterward, this.props.saveNote, passing in the note, which means, well, since this should be a function, just put an error function in here that does that. So handle changes now, copies this.state.note, updates the title, calls setState to update the note, and then calls this.props.saveNote, passing in the note. We'll comment this out for right now. See if there are any other references to current note. Handle editor changes still uses this.props.currentNote. Not what we want it to do anymore. So handle editor changes is going to change this.state.note, just like handle changes does. So constant note equals this.state.note. Set the note body to the editor value converted to a string, and call this.setState. Now we will change both note and editor value. And when that finishes, I need to make sure that I call this.props.saveNote, passing in my updated note. Forget my comma. Yeah, not actually using this, but I already did change this.state.note.title. Yeah. Now remove current note. If we're not going to store the current note up at the app level, that needs to change too. So app has remove current note. I will change this to remove note and have it accept a note as an argument. And instead of removing this.state.currentNote, I'll just remove whatever note was passed in. When we set current note, we're going to have to deal with that here before too terribly long. It now receives a note as an argument. Yeah. note.id instead of current note.id, because current note is not going to be a thing here soon. What is going on right now? How broken is it? Pretty broken. So blank note inside this dot state. Of course, it's not there. I moved it out. So in app, we won't have current note, but I suppose we could have current note ID, which I'll just initially set to null. Let's find every place that we refer to current note in here. Okay, we have set current note. I suppose I'll set current note ID. Just pass in an ID. Set state current note ID to the note ID that was passed in. Reset current note. I guess that could call set current note ID back to null. Save note calls it. I could set current note ID to note.id instead. Oops. We reset current note when we remove a note. We could reset current note ID. When we unauth, we can set current note ID back to null. Now, if we had routes, this is a bunch of work that we wouldn't have to do, but it's probably good practice anyway. When we render main, we pass down set current note. We will now pass down set current note ID. Remove current note should now just be remove note. And this should be current note ID instead of current note. So let's see what we do with all those things. Down in main. Well, what did I do? Did I hit? I missed reset current note to reset current note ID. I think, nope, reset current note ID. I did change its behavior, but I suppose reset current note's actually an okay name for that. I'll leave that one alone. So in main, reset current note is fine in the sidebar. Set current note in note list, I want to be set current note ID. And to note form, I want to pass current note ID, not current note. And remove current note becomes remove note. So in note list, I have set current note ID, which I pass right on to the note component. And then in the note component, set current note ID. So when I click, I will set current note ID to note.id. And in note form, when I delete, instead of this.props.remove current note, I'll go ahead and make this dot handle remove, handle remove. We'll call this dot props dot remove note and pass in this dot state dot note. So what's our current explosion? This dot blank note, not a function. It's right here. What are you talking about? Can I not do this if I do it in a property initializer? Perhaps not. Yeah. All right, fine. We'll use a constructor like some kind of animal. This dot state equals, fix my indentation. Thank you. Super and the props, of course. All right, not exploding. So what we want to happen is when we click one of these, if you look at our React Dev Tools, you see current node ID got updated. That will make this receive new props, right? We'll get current node ID out of there. I'll just call it next node ID. And if this dot state dot node ID is not equal to next node ID, then I need to set state with that note. Which I need to get out of the list of all notes, which isn't currently being passed down to note form. If I look at note form in here, I think note form, yeah, the list of all the notes isn't there. So in main, which does have that list, let's pass that down to note form too. Notes equal props.notes. So my next props will also have, in addition to current node ID, it'll have the list of notes. Next notes. So I can set state note to next notes square bracket next node ID. Where? Yep, thanks. Yep. Notes colon next notes. So the prop that is passed in as notes, I want to call next notes here. And I want to set the state. I want to set the note in the current state to next note square bracket next node ID. It is. Let's start over. Okay. So when we click a thing in the sidebar, that is now setting a prop called current note ID. When my props change, I will run this. And forget that for right now. Let's just put next props in there. That's what the props are about to change to. Let's make a variable called next ID. That will be next props dot current node ID. Let's make a local variable note, which should be next props dot notes square bracket this next ID. Now, what if that ID is null or something like that, and there is no such null note? What if there isn't a note at that ID for whatever reason? It could also be because it was deleted. If I put notes ID from URL or this dot blank note, so if this thing is, I don't know if you know this about ORs, but whichever one is true, it actually returns that value, not true or false. So this would return, if this were true, it would return that note. If it weren't, it would evaluate the right side of the OR. Because an OR, it won't bother with the right side if the left side's true, right? Because only one of them has to be true. But then it'll evaluate the one on the right. And that's a blank note. So this will get set to a blank note. So I'm going to set it to either the note that I just changed to or a blank note. Now let's worry about the editor value. So let editor value equal this dot state dot editor value if editor value to string HTML string is not equal to note.body, then I need to set editor value equal to, well, I need to turn this string into an editor value, right? Which was rich text editor dot create value from string. Pass in note.body. Tell it what kind of string that is. It's HTML. So now by this line, I have the right note and I have the right editor value. So regardless of whether I follow that if branch or whether which side of this OR evaluated, I can set this dot set state to, I can set this note and I can set this editor value. Now, saving this won't necessarily change my props, only if the ID changed. Because the entire node isn't being passed back down as a prop anymore, only the ID. So that won't trigger quite as many component will receive props. So let's see what happens. Okay, good. Clicking a new one, good. See, current node ID set to null. Good, good. Can I edit the thing? Backspace works. Hey there, everybody. Let's delete this. Ooh, delete made it blow up. Reset current node ID is not a function. Yep. Back in app, remove note. I didn't rename reset current node ID. It's just reset current note. It just does that by changing the ID. Let's try that again. Now I can delete without it exploding. Can I still add new ones? There it is. Yep, seems to work. We fixed it. So again, here's what's up. Things got complicated because this rich text editor can't just take a string as its value. So I couldn't just pass in the body. I had to have this weird editor value on state. And when it's blank, I have to call richTextEditor.createEmptyValue. When it's something other than blank, I need to call richTextEditor.createValue from string. If it changes, I call handleEditorChanges. The new value gets passed in. And I need to update the body of the note by turning this value into a string. So I get my note out of state. I change the body to editorValue.toString, passing in HTML, because that's how this rich text editor works. Then I update state. I update the note and the editor value. And then I still call this.props.saveNote way back up on app. And that takes care of my saving. What it doesn't take care of is if I change notes. So before clicking a note in the note list, would set this current note object, which is what the form was bound to. But now note form has its own state, and the form is bound to that state. So the current note now lives on note form's state. So all we do on app is set the ID. So clicking the note now updates current note ID. So in note form, we have to notice when that changes, which we can do with componentWillReceiveProps. If any of my props change, this will get run. So I get the current note ID out of there. I get the note at that ID. If it's not there, which could be because next ID is null, then I set this note variable to a blank note. Otherwise, I set it to the note whose ID was passed in. So I may have to mess with the editor value. So I get that out of state, this.state.editorValue. I convert that to a string and I compare that to the body of the note that I got on line 17. If they're not the same, then I know that the editor value needs to change. I need to create the value from the note body. So I do that. Having done that, I set both the note and the editor value on state. So if the ID changed, this will get set, which will update this.state.note. If that results in the note body being something other than what the editor value currently holds, it'll create a value out of that string and set that to the editor value in state. So the form gets updated. Because the form doesn't get it straight from this.state.note, because this.state.note.body is a string, and the rich text editor component doesn't deal with strings. And now it seems to work. Now in the list, we see the HTML here, which seems less than ideal. But hey, we just got a big thing working, so. Edit notes with rich text. Our work in progress is no longer in progress.